Hi, year 11s. This is Mr. Lim again, and this is our I don't know, some video on changes to conditions of reactions. And today we're going to be talking about catalysts. All right, so let's have a look. So what are we going to be doing? We're going to be describing what a catalyst is, nice and easy. Describe how catalysts change in terms of collision theory, always relating back to collision theory. Predict changes. Use diagrams. Okay, so we're going to draw lots of diagrams and show how catalysts change things. And then we're going to learn something new about this word, enzymes. You might have heard it before, but we're going to learn a little bit more about it. Okay, so let's have a look. What are catalysts? Catalysts are substances that provide an alternative reaction pathway. So these are the words that you need to use in your answers with a lower activation energy. Okay, so alternative reaction pathway, which means that you can go, instead of going from you know, how would I say it? Let's go give an example. Let's say instead of going from H2 plus O2 straight to H2O, right? It might go to I don't know, this is just some hypothetical one, OH plus OH, and then to H2O. And this pathway here has a lower activation energy than this pathway here. Okay, so there's like some intermediary step, right, which breaks down that one step, and that one step is much smaller than that big step over there. Okay, so those two steps are smaller than the energy required for that one big step. Okay, and so that's the idea behind catalysts. Okay, so what else do they do? They can also provide a surface for reactions to occur, which promotes the correct reaction orientation. Okay, so the orientation of the particles is important. Sometimes catalysts, they provide a surface for the reactions to occur where they get some of the reactants and they stick them in the right way so that they promote the correct reaction orientation. Okay, so for example, maybe you need your two reactants to collide in this particular manner. Okay, so they need to go this way and this way. Okay, so maybe what a catalyst will do is that instead of allowing all of the red particles to roll around randomly, they line them up this way so that and like not this way, okay, so not that way, so that the reactant particles are going to come in and they're going to crash into them in the right orientation. Okay, so catalysts are present. Oops, that's not what I wanted. No. Catalysts are present where the reaction is occurring. Okay, so they are present, so they are there, but they are not consumed in the reaction. So if you think about it, right, by the end of the reaction, you have no more reactants, you only have products, right? But catalysts are not consumed in the reaction, which means that they are there when the reaction is over as well. Okay, they are written above the arrow in a chemical reaction. So, for example, if you have A plus B goes to C, this is where you would write your catalyst, depending what it is. Okay, so if it's like phosphoric acid, that's where you would write that catalyst above the arrow. Okay, and not all chemical reactions have a catalyst. Okay, only some do, but generally there are some. Most chemical reactions have a catalyst to do. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, describe how catalysts change the particles in terms of collision theory. So, adding a catalyst will changes the proportion of particles with sufficient energy to react. Okay, so let's have a think about it. Because it lowers the required activation energy, okay, it's always going to increase the proportion of particles with sufficient energy to react, which is useful. Okay, but it is, remember these words, proportion of particles with sufficient energy. Okay, it's also going to increase the frequency of collisions with the correct orientation. Okay, so again, that idea that some catalysts will be able to hold things in the right way so that they will collide in the right way. Okay, so again, it increases the frequency of collisions with the correct orientation and therefore increasing the rate of reaction, which means that adding a catalyst will always increase the rate of reaction, which is useful to remember. Also, alternatively, you can remove a catalyst to decrease the rate of reaction, but that doesn't really technically count. Okay, so catalysts always increase the rate of reaction. So how do we show the effect of catalysts on rates of reaction? So let's have a think. this is an energy distribution graph, and here is your activation energy. Okay, which means that these particles here can react or have sufficient energy to react. If you have a lower activation energy, that EA line is going to be further towards the left or right? The left. Okay, so here's your new activation energy line, and so therefore these now are the particles that have sufficient energy to react. Okay, and so there's a greater proportion of the total particles with sufficient energy to react, and therefore the rate of reaction is going to go faster because there's going to be more frequent successful collisions. Don't forget these words. Okay, so make sure that you remember that. Okay, more frequent successful collisions. Okay, so that's the idea, greater proportion of particles with sufficient energy. Okay, you can also show this lower activation energy on an energy profile diagram. Okay, so where's the activation energy here? It's between here and here. That's the EA of the forward rate of reaction, or for a forward reaction. You can draw the effect of a catalyst by doing this, where you have a new reaction with a lower activation energy. So this is the EA with the catalyst, right? A lower activation energy than the one without the catalyst. Okay, please note that it does not change delta H. Okay, delta H does not change at all when you add a catalyst. All right, it just changes the what's the name of this point? Do you remember what the name of this point is? It's the transition state. Okay, it just changes the height of that transition state, and so therefore that rate of reaction is going to increase because greater proportion of particles have sufficient energy. Okay, so that's what you draw there. Okay, let's have a look. What are enzymes? So what are these words? What's this thing called enzymes? Enzymes are biological catalysts. Okay, so in other words, they're catalysts that exist or are created by living creatures. Okay, or living organisms that allow reactions to occur at a much lower temperature because they require a lower activation energy than they would normally require. Okay, so some of the reactions in your body would require temperatures of hundreds of degrees, but because you have these enzymes that are doing their thing, you only have to get up to 37 degrees for these things to work. Right? How do they work? They grab reactants and they hold them together and help them to react, or they hold one substance and split them apart. So effectively, they're grabbing onto things, putting them together, or helping them come together, or they can take one thing and split it apart. Okay, this is the important part. Enzymes hold on to reactants. Actually, this is not really the important part. This becomes important in year 12 because they have complementary shapes. Okay, so they hold on because they have complementary shapes, and this is often called the lock and key model, and you might learn about this in biology and human biology. Okay, another thing is that they only catalyze one reaction, which means that they're useful for not having all these other reactions occur if you are using enzymes for other stuff. Okay, so what does that look like? Okay, so here's an enzyme and substrate. Substrate are the reactants. Okay, so what happens is that, see here, you have a complementary shape. Okay, so a complementary shape, it fits in. This enzyme does its thing and it splits it up into two parts, and then it can now release those two parts away. Okay, and if you were to take that substrate and try and break it apart via other chemical reactions, that would use up a lot more chemical energy, or a lot more energy, and so these enzymes reduce that amount of energy required and allow you to do it at biological temperatures. And that's it. Adios.